Welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're here today. We are going to unpack one of the most profound, yet totally invisible forces that shapes human behavior. We're talking about the deep evolutionary link between social status and biological success. We're going to see how the exact same instincts that drove our prehistoric ancestors still completely dictate how we organize ourselves today, who we admire, and ultimately, who gets to pass on their genes. Okay, let's dive right into this. Have you ever wondered why humans are just so obsessed with social status? I mean, everywhere we look, we're creating hierarchies, right? We compete for prestige, influence, and power. But if our modern society claims to value equality, why does hierarchy pop up literally everywhere? Well, the answer is buried deep in our evolutionary biology. Back in our ancestral environments, recognizing and climbing that social ladder wasn't just some ego trip. It was a literal matter of survival and reproductive success. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll quickly cover the evolution of hierarchy, then dominance and mating, the era of god kings and polygyny, modern gangs, and finally, the modern prestige premium. Section 1. Evolution of social hierarchy, from ancestral bands to complex societies. To really grasp our biological baseline, we have to travel way back in time. For more than 95% of human history, we lived in these small, highly interdependent hunter-gatherer bands of about 30 to 150 people. And get this, they actually maintained a surprisingly egalitarian structure. They used what's called reverse dominance hierarchies. Basically, the whole group would team up to ridicule or even exile anyone who tried to act like a tyrant. But then, right around 12,500 years ago, agriculture hits the scene. Suddenly, we have food surpluses and population sizes just explode. This created something anthropologists call scalar stress. You just can't have a chill, consensus-driven meeting with thousands of people, right? So, to prevent total chaos, delegating decision-making to a centralized leader became this absolutely necessary evolutionary adaptation. Hierarchy was permanently institutionalized. Section 2. Dominance, prestige, and mating, the two paths to power. So, the hierarchy was locked in, but the drive to reach the top of that ladder actually split into two incredibly distinct evolutionary strategies. Evolutionary psychology clearly breaks down these two pathways. On one side, you have dominance. This is all about force, fear, intimidation, and raw physical strength. It's built on imposing costs on everyone else. But on the flip side, we have prestige. Here, people gain status because others genuinely admire their valuable skills, their specialized knowledge, or their generosity. Prestige is all about conferring benefits to the group. Instinctively, we fear dominant leaders, but we voluntarily follow and look up to prestigious ones. And the data brilliantly illustrates this divide. Notice the mechanism of influence here. Prestige-style leadership actually provides benefits to followers. Think of a knowledgeable elder sharing life-saving wisdom with the tribe. Dominant-style leadership, though, inflicts costs on anyone who doesn't fall in line. Think of an aggressive alpha threatening sanctions. The followers of a prestige leader are active and respectful, while followers of a dominance leader are passive and fearful. It's a fundamental split in our evolutionary wiring. So what does this all mean for reproductive success? Well, it creates a fascinating evolutionary trade-off for women, which is known as strategic pluralism. Studies show that women sometimes prefer dominant men for short-term sexual affairs. Why? Because dominance displays physical formidability, which signals high-quality genes. But dominant men can be pretty unreliable as stable providers. Prestigious men, however, signal reliable provisioning and stability, which makes them highly desirable for long-term romantic relationships, even if they don't always flash the overt aggressive signals of a dominant male. Moving to Section 3, the God Kings and polygyny, stratification on a cosmic scale. As human societies scaled up from those tiny bands into the massive agricultural and imperial ages, hierarchies didn't just grow, they reached astonishing, literally cosmic extremes. You can trace a direct, soaring escalation of status. It kicked off with early tribal shamans, where authority was mostly spiritual. But as huge urban centers formed, that spiritual authority completely merged with political and military might. By the 23rd century BCE, Naram-Sin of Akkad became the very first Mesopotamian ruler to declare himself an actual living god. This whole idea peaked with systems like ancient Egypt, where the pharaoh wasn't just favored by the gods, he was considered the literal living incarnation of the sky god Horus. The social order became sacred. And what was the biological reward for wielding this absolute divinely sanctioned dominance? Unprecedented reproductive success. This era completely cemented polygyny. This is a mating system where high-status men, your ancient kings, emperors, and tribal chiefs, leverage their ultimate rank to maintain sexual relations with massive numbers of wives and concubines. Their absolute power translated directly into a massive multiplication of their genetic lineage. Let's move to Section 4 and see how this builds into today's world. Dominance in modern gangs, ancient hierarchies in the urban jungle. Now, you might be thinking these primal dominance hierarchies are just dusty relics of ancient history, right? Actually, they are perfectly preserved in certain modern environments. Evolutionary psychologists have found that modern urban street gangs flawlessly mirror our ancestral dominance hierarchies. Just look at the structure. They are predominantly male groups organized specifically to control territory and resources. They frequently clash in violent conflict with outgroups. Within the gang, displaying sheer ferocity directly and rapidly boosts a member's social status. And the powerful biological motivator underlying all this risk and violence, gaining sexual access to women. The data here is just undeniable. Evolutionary psychologists Craig Palmer and Christopher Tilley uncovered a striking fact. Gang members reported significantly higher numbers of sex partners than non-gang members. In fact, some gang members report more partners in a single month than an average guy does in an entire year. And crucially, it was the male leaders of the gangs, the guys sitting at the absolute top of the dominance hierarchy, who reported the highest amount of sex partners. So yeah, modern dominance still yields extreme short-term reproductive success. Now, what's really interesting about this is that the preference for dominant-style bravery extends way beyond illicit gangs. It shows up in socially sanctioned warfare, too. Archival data on World War II veterans in the U.S. reveals that recipients of the Congressional Medal of Honor actually fathered more children on average than veterans who didn't receive the honor. It's a huge piece of evidence supporting the hypothesis that there's an active sexual selection process for dominant-style leadership and bravery in combat. Finally, Section 5, the modern prestige premium, status in the boardroom. Let's shift our focus to how this ancient biological programming plays out today in legally monogamous, westernized societies where outright violence is punished. Even though the massive harems of the ancient god kings are thankfully a thing of the past in Western societies, the underlying drive for high-status men to multiply their reproductive success is completely unchanged. Today, high-status men often leverage their increased sexual access through alternative routes, serial marriages, racking up multiple short-term partners, or engaging in extramarital affairs. The cultural rules have shifted, so the evolutionary pressure adapts, but the deep-seated instinct, it doesn't disappear. So the crucial point is that this exact link between rank and biology shows up right now in our modern corporate data. A 2012 study looked at modern businesses and found a clear, undeniable correlation. Men in supervisory and management positions consistently had a higher number of children compared to their subordinates. Income and status in the corporate hierarchy literally translate into a larger family size. It perfectly echoes the dynamics of prehistoric tribal ranks. And there is no way this evolutionary prestige premium is just a corporate thing. It applies equally to the intellectual realm. A 2005 study within universities found that male academics holding high-status positions had more children compared to other male employees. Whether you're leading a boardroom, commanding a prehistoric hunting party, or holding a prestigious university chair, the biological outcome of having elevated social status remains remarkably, almost eerily, consistent. So, to summarize everything we've covered today, the hierarchies we see everywhere around us, from corporate ladders to social media influencers to politicians, they aren't just accidental cultural quirks. They are the direct manifestations of ancient evolutionary survival instincts. Our brains were wired in small tribes where status meant survival and reproductive success. And those exact same prehistoric circuits, they are operating seamlessly in our modern world right now. Which leaves us with a fascinating and maybe a little bit unsettling question to ponder as you navigate your own career, your relationships, and the media you consume. How are your own perceptions of modern leaders, bosses, and celebrities secretly being influenced by your deeply ingrained prehistoric instincts? It is definitely something to think about the next time you find yourself naturally deferring to the person sitting at the head of the table. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll see you next time.